a table.
I know, it's lovely, isn't it?
With I write written on it.
It does, indeed. Now I've got millions of questions which I've already... If we get through these, I'll be delighted. It's a huge, mighty tome, this.
It's a huge, mighty life.
Indeed. How long did it take? I'd like to just know the nuts and bolts in it. How long did it actually take to go through all of this?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing was that the Hacienda book took 3 years. The Joy Division book took 2 years. And I thought this would take a year as my experience grew, but it didn't. It took 3 years. From start to finish, because the interesting thing was that once you went into the detail and started to remember, and also I felt it was very important, after being inspired by Bernard's book with its startling lack of detail, to detail how we did the records, how we did the sound, really. I mean, the sound was quite unique when we did it in 1980, which was a cross between rock and dance. And I must admit, the way that we write with computer now is completely different to how you had to do it then, which was almost, you'd have to say, analog and barbaric. And I had to learn how to do it so I could write and tell you lot how we did it. Because I thought it was important, to show not only did we play hard, but we also worked hard. So maybe we worked too hard, and that made us play too hard.
Well, there are these,
any excuse.
There are these moments throughout the book that just says geek alert, and then you go into the equipment, you go into the nuts and bolts. Literally, you talk about drum machines or synthesizers and so on.
Well, I mean, the thing is that they're the tools of my trade that maybe people take for granted, in that you put a record on, you're not really interested in the pain they've been through to make that record. Now, New Order went through a lot of pain to make those tracks, and I thought that it was interesting to do it, but I'm also aware that some of you looking around will only be interested in drugs and girls. So I put the geek alert in, you see, so you could just jump.
Yeah, there's plenty of girls and drugs in the book, you'll be pleased to know. Was it difficult to write?
The drugs and the girls? No, it's dead easy.
3 books in, this is the most traumatic part of your life in many ways, also the most successful part of your life. But when you were going through those memories and dredging up those memories, was it cathartic, or was it actually kind of painful?
Well, because of the legal battle that I'm having with the others, which is still very much a boiling point. I was actually in court yesterday, in the High Court in London. It is, because it makes it all feel shit, to be honest. Because like any divorce, looking around, I think a few of you have had traumatic divorces, me especially. That pain you feel when everything goes wrong tends to colour the whole bit. It's no use telling someone who's going through a terrible divorce, remember the good times. You remember it just ain't going to work, So I suppose the thing is that when I did start to immerse myself in the book properly, in great detail, then I did realise that New Order were very much a product of the 80s, in the fact that we started with Ian's untimely demise, and more or less ended with the England World Cup song in 1990. And for those 10 years, it was a hell of a ride. It really was. The majority of the book is about those first 10 years. And then we started breaking up all the time, getting back together again. The usual crap that most groups go through. So I suppose in a funny way, to last 10 years as we did, it was a little bit less than that, to be honest. But,
how did you research it? Because obviously there's your own memories, but did you use the and I'm judging by the carry-on, it can't just be your own memories. Did you go through boxes of photos, magazines, obviously the internet?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing, it was sort of, it started pre-drugs, and then it went a bit wild. So I needed a bit of help in the middle, really, but the early part, it was easy to remember from the gigs. And I mean, and also New Order were quite unique as a group in that whilst we weren't very hands-on in the running, we were aware, shall we say. Not that it made us any brighter or any more careful, but we were aware of what was happening. Factory was a bit of a DIY situation. So you were involved in more or less every aspect of your career right the way through. So you do remember it. You know, it's not like being take that or one direction. You're just into car, out of cars. You know, we were actually involved in a lot of the decisions because it was very DIY. Mm-hmm. And especially at the start, we still were very punky in our relationship with the music business. Mm-hmm. You know, we were doing things very much on our own terms. So you were more aware of it because it was difficult. You know, it certainly wasn't easy.
It's really interesting the way the books, you know, as well as all these rollicking stories throughout, it's split into two sections, movement and brotherhood. Why did you do that? Was it specifically to deal with certain sections? I think it works really well.
Well, the LPs were, you know, as a musician and as an older music listener, it was all about the records. So I just felt that those sections deserved to be named. Mm-hmm. For those, and I love the titles. Yeah, I mean, the book was originally called Power, Corruption and Lies, which was just a dig at the others because of what they did to me in 2011. And then when I was writing it, I thought, you know, this is too substantial a book to be tainted by that bitterness. Mm-hmm. Bum ding substance. Yeah, dead obvious, and then it worked in really well because we're actually playing substance now, you know. So
with your band,
yeah,
right?
But I mean, it's very easy to use books as a vehicle just to, you know, get a few digs in. If any of you read Bernard's book.
I haven't actually read it. I can put my hand up and definitely say I haven't read it, but you in the list of kind of your books that you've referenced right at the end, you do list it as a book that you've read.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because when I went to the index and I saw all the bits about me, calling me a twat, I was very flattered that it's put 100 pages on 31 years of New Order. And in 69 of them devoted just to me being a twat. I thought, yeah, it was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, there's also these top 10s which I really like scattered throughout the book. Explain those as well, because I mean I can jog your memory if you want, but things you should do when forming a band, things you should never do when forming a band.
Same things.
Although there's 14 of them in your top 10. And then there's best bass riffs, 13 of them. Best hotels, best New Order songs, people you never played with but wanted to, people you did play with, medical problems, which is quite an interesting list as you might imagine, and bass cab messages, of which there are 16. Where did that idea come from, these top 10s?
Those shit at top 10s.
Yeah, yeah.
The top 10s, as much as I don't hate to say it, I stole off Chris Evans in his books, because I've always loved lists. You know, when I did the Joy Division book, the listing everything gives me great pleasure. And I had all the set lists in here for every gig, which was fantastic, and I was over the moon with it. And Simon & Schuster just said, oh, it's too long, mate, we can't print it. And I was like, oh, no. So, you know, the ebook, when we do the proper ebook, this is 200,000 words. The ebook will be over 300,000. So, but I do like details. I like that. I love it. I love to read a book that has things like that in.
Did you keep a diary? Because it is unbelievably detailed.
No.
I mean, you didn't keep any diaries at all?
No.
And there are these timelines at the end of certain sections, which, I mean, I think there are 17 in all throughout the book, which will go through either an entire year or year and a half or 2 years or whatever. And again, they're meticulously detailed, and they have, again, more anecdotes underneath some of the details.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do because some of the happenings that we had at the gigs were very, very memorable. So that was quite easy. I've also got two wonderful friends called David Sultan, a Frenchman who lives in America, and a guy called Claude Flowers, who was my original inspiration to do a book. It was him that told me to do the Hacienda book. So those two, they run websites and they've done books on New Order and Joy Division, so they made sure that I got everything right. It was quite interesting that you argue about things that were right, because from a fan's point of view, I know the things behind. They only know the things that happened, you see. So we had some great arguments about whether things were right or not. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that you use for material. And it was actually quite easy to do the chronology of it, because because I started playing Joy Division again in 2010, and I'm working through all the records and all the tracks, it's actually quite easy to remember them.
And learning how to play all those songs again.
Well, yeah, I mean, luckily I have my son for that, because now that I sing, he actually plays most of the riffs, and he's always telling me how to play it. Hang on a minute. Because it's in a typical young boy fashion, he always thinks he's right. And I can't imagine where he's got it from.
Well,
but yeah, so it was easy-ish to remember. And there was other people that helped, and I suppose the big problem was, and I don't know if it's a problem really, I mean, I always think you should write the books. It's about me. This is my version, and this is my truth of what happened, and that's how you have to stick to it, because what happens is that I remember when we were together, me, Bernard and Steve, you could ask us all about the same incident, and you'd get 3 completely different answers. So the more people you involve in the book, the more different answers you get, and then you start getting confused and you start to question, your version of it. So you do have to be careful. And I think the thing is that the book is about, the young lady was just doing an interview backstage there. She was asking, sell me the book, sell everybody the book, and really the book was written for me. When we started out as Joy Division, we didn't sell any records, and nobody had heard of Joy Division. Nobody cared about Joy Division. But Joy Division were a great band. It's just that nobody knew it. We had great satisfaction when we made that record, and really it was enough for us, the fact that we made the record. It's enough for me, the fact that I've done the book. Whether anyone buys it or not, I'm used to, in my career, it going up and down and up and down. So that isn't the reason why you do things. You do things because you're proud of it and it makes you happy, satisfies you creatively or whatever. And you hope that people will like it.
Well, it's vast in its size and the amount of words and the amount of anecdotes and so on. And let's kind of rattle through it. First and foremost, I love the phrase, a certain member of our entourage, which gets used all the way through the book. Can you explain that, please?
No.
Basically, whenever there's absolute filth being written about, a certain member of our entourage, and then the story. There are people out there that you could really incriminate with this book. I mean, most of them are named, in fairness, but a certain member of our entourage.
Listen, it's up to the public to decide, isn't it? The thing is that I do what I do, and you're the jury, aren't you? There you go. It's a very difficult question, isn't it? I mean, to go through Bernard's book when I did, and to be vilified in it, and when a lot of it simply wasn't true, which is what I suppose he'll say about this. So everyone's entitled to their opinion, but people, make up their own minds, don't they? It's like my son always gets upset. He's been very upset this week with the amount of abuse you get on Twitter. I just simply don't read it. I don't think you should. I can't see why anyone would. If they're going to be upset by it, read it. to get upset by someone called Captain Dangler. I mean, if you're going to get upset, they could at least have the guts to put their own bloody name on it. And here's my address. Right now, that's when I take people seriously, when they actually don't hide behind some anonymous name. I think it's pathetic, and they're arseholes and cowards. There's nothing worse. So if anybody wants to come and criticise me, put your name and address on it, mate, and I'll come round and see you. We'll have a talk about it. And that's how it should be. And I always say to him, listen, son, as long as it's 50-50, we'll be all right. It's when it goes that way. Oh, watch out. Ooh, that's good. So yeah, it's one of them things, isn't it? Social media's disgusting. I watch kids be tormented by it. And the thing is that, you used to get bullied in the playground. Now you can be bullied 24 hours. Fantastic. You came up with that one. In your bedroom at home, you can get bullied. It's bollocks. Yeah, it's a tough one, but...
Well, going back to the beginning, right to the beginning of the book, describe your mindset and the feeling within the group when you're left without Ian. Ian's taken his own life. It seemed quite businesslike. You seemed, when I mean that, I mean functional in that you just carried on.
Yeah, I mean, we were young and we didn't know what to do. And in the same way that, when you were young and your Auntie Mabel dies and your mother goes, oh, leave our Peter at home, we don't want him to go to a funeral. It was pretty much like that, really. I mean, it felt surreal enough as it was, but people were, they did protect you from it. And because of that, I mean, I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to go into why I felt I'd let me mate down badly, and why it was such a shock to us and why we didn't see it coming. And then everyone going, oh, didn't you read his lyrics, you dickheads? Oh, God. So I suppose in a way you drew strength from being together and you drew strength from carrying on regardless. A very English type of attitude, really. And we literally did. We went to the inquest on the Thursday, and after the inquest I remember having something to eat in a little pub, probably a pint to eat, more than food, and we said, oh, well, see you at the practice place on Monday. And it was as simple as that, and that gave me a focus, I mean, really now as an old gentleman, I think we did rush it. We should have gone, right, I'll tell you what, I'll see you in a few months. Let me get my head around this. But we didn't. We chose to get strength from being together and carrying on. Because that's what I think Ian would have wanted of us. He wanted us just to play music. I mean, the guy was the greatest band leader and leader I've ever had in my life. Even now, it was him that whenever you started to falter, or whenever things got a bit on top of you, or you thought, oh shit, we're not as good as them, or they're beating us, it was always him that came and grabbed you. Come on, leading from the front. He was an absolute wonder to work with. I've never worked with anybody like that. I've never worked with a more generous lead singer than he was. Because lead singers generally aren't like that. The cliche about, each member of the band, the drummer being off with the fairies, the guitarist being into black magic, the bass player always driving the van, and the lead singer being a prize knobhead. It's pretty much true. It's funny how you separate into those cliches, you see. But Ian wasn't like that, so maybe he hadn't had time to have been corrupted. And the way that he led you musically was amazing, I mean, we didn't even have enough money to record what we were doing. As I said in the Joy Division book, the only time that Joy Division existed was when we played. You'd be sat there, no noise, you'd play Joy Division. Wow. So he was the band leader, and he used to pick the bits that sounded great and tell you to, no, don't play low, play high. It sounds great when you play high. Drives it along, come on. Steve, put them jungle drums on. Boof, you're off. And to actually get there on the Monday and to not have him was actually in many ways more shocking than the funeral or the inquest, because you were like, oh my God, he has actually gone, and we had to learn how to do it, how to stand on our own, and teach ourselves how to write, pick the good bits, because he always did it. So yeah, I mean, it was quite a traumatic learning process, but we soon got into it, and as Rob and Tony both said to us, you've still got a lot to do, you've still got a lot to say, just get on with it. Well, okay. And we really did, and it was only when we came to sing that, of course, it was just like wave again, because writing the music was dead easy. I actually wrote Dreams Never End in the back bedroom of my house in Boston on the Sunday before we went in on the Monday. And I had the guitar line, so, we weren't short of material, it's just that nobody wanted to sing.
And there was no looking back, it wasn't like you went over the old material, you went straight into it, moving forward.
We always said that if anybody left Joy Division, then Joy Division was over. We actually did say that about New Order, but they seem to have forgotten that. It's amazing what a financial crisis of 2008 can do for you. So it was easy. That Ian was gone, and so was Joy Division, and that was the end of it. And I must admit, that focus and that concentrating on what we were doing as New Order worked. It made New Order much more successful in commercial terms. It made them successful in international terms. If we'd have been playing Joy Division stuff as well, it just wouldn't have worked. We wouldn't have had the success that we had, because it would have confused the issue. It wouldn't have been. You just couldn't have done it.
Talk about the singer scenario at the beginning then, because there was a period when you were singing, Barney was singing,
it was
Stephen
a great
period. And even Rob Gretton would get on and sing every now and again in the practice room.
It was the best period of New Order when we were all singing, in my opinion, because it was very balanced. And there was none of the jockeying for position. We were all singing. We were doing 3 each. And Steve was hilarious. He really was. I've never seen anybody so frightened when they were singing in my life. And the irony was that Steve was writing most of the vocal lines. It actually came easiest to him, much easier than it did to me or Bernard. That changed over the years. But yeah, he was doing most of the vocal lines, and then we'd work together on the words. And we worked together on the words, God, right through to technique. It was always the three of us that would write all the words. It's the thing you need the most help with.
The thing that I found really interesting as well was that a lot of the song titles come from you reading stacks of books in the studios and then suggesting a lyric, a name.
Before I discovered drugs. What can I say? I used to read, and it's the way that I deal with the boredom in the studio. And I'd have a massive pile of books, and the names were cribbed from the books usually. It was great. It's a really easy way to do it, because in New Order and Joy Division, most of the time the title had nothing to do with the content of the song. Bizarre Love Triangle, I got from the tabloids one Sunday about a vicar and his wife and a member of the congregation. And then the tabloids have been taking advantage of me ever since. That'll teach me. So yeah, it was a good way of doing it, just dealing with it, because I always felt that my job from the start was to be there. Once Martin Hannett had gone, you needed someone from the group who was there all the time. The others didn't like that. So I sat there with Mike Johnson, who was our engineer, fantastic guy, fantastic engineer. And that was my job. That only changed when the group started to fall apart. We weren't getting on.
Just rewind a little bit. Martin Hannett, you just mentioned. What happened at the break down the sort of friendship with him and then the working relationship? Explain that.
Well,
You go into it in the book,
you
obviously.
didn't really have a friendship with Martin because we were so young and he was much older. He was 10 years older, which is a big gap then when you're 21. 20, 21, he's 31, you know, I mean, there's a big difference between a 31-year-old and a 20-year-old. So he just used you like fuel. He didn't want to talk to you. He just wanted you to give him the music and he would make it, you know, how he wanted to make it. He didn't want any back chat. He didn't want any tips. He was just shut up and do one. And that was okay for the start when we didn't know what to do. But then particularly with Barney and I, once we learned and started getting a bit mouthy, and then, you know, the bits you see in the films in Control and 24-Hour Party People where he's trying to get us thrown out of the studio were actually correct. But if it taught me one thing, you know, I mean, Bernard and I hated Unknown Pleasures when it came out because we wanted to sound like the Sex Pistols and the Clash, like a pair of idiots. And the truth was, we weren't writing songs like the Sex Pistols or the Clash, so they were never going to sound like them. But in our heads, we wanted it to sound punky, guitar, wanted to rip your head off. And Martin recognised the potential in those songs and gave them, you know, their just desserts. And it took me and Barney a few years to, oh God, I get it. Yeah, now I understand. And, you know, once we learnt it, basically he talked himself out of a job, you know. I mean, he descended into drug addiction and it was ruling his life, and in the, you know, the same way that I did. Later on, it became all about the drugs and not about the music.
Mm-hmm. And he also missed Ian as well. He would berate Ian and shout at Ian and stuff.
Well, I mean, mate, it was funny. Right, us three trying to sing would be, I'm not kidding, you know, taking someone who's never sung and shoving him in a studio and having three guys go, "Go on, sing, you bastard, sing!" You know, because singing is the most naked thing that you can ever do. I mean, I know it's different now with all these reality TV programs. You're fed a diet of people who've never sung before. Here's little Johnny, he's never sung before, you know, and it's scary to sing. Even in a studio with all the lights down, you feel that you're nakedest and very vulnerable. And we were very vulnerable because we knew that basically we were imposters. And Martin knew it, and he never failed to let us know how shit we were compared to Ian. And you know, oh, cheers, mate. You know, and the bits I write about in the book where he basically tried to humiliate you were absolutely true. You know, his style, as his drug addiction got worse, became crueler and crueler. And it actually got to the point where you just couldn't put up with him anymore. Mm-hmm. You couldn't. He was ruining the band. And Barney and I said, you know, he's got to go. Mm-hmm. We were always the more forthcoming pair.
And you started this really great working relationship with Mike as well. At
yeah,
least for
Mike,
a few years.
Yeah, Mike was the T-boy on Closer. And at the end of Closer, we were doing an edit on the end of Isolation to get the echo to go off right. The engineer, he was a nice guy actually, John, he couldn't do it. And he kept making it because you were cutting tape with a razor blade. This might sound really wild to the younger ones in the audience, but you know, Isolation was that wide. And he was cutting it with a razor blade and then sticking it back together with tape so that you could play it. And the guy couldn't do it, his nerves were too bad. And he kept cutting too much out. Once you cut too much out, you cannot put it back in. And Mike fixed it. And we were like, wow. And that was why we hired him, because he fixed that edit on the tape, and he was with us. He was with us until the others sacked him because he was my mate, which was the saddest thing of all, because he'd done every record up to Republic. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, you know, you're chronicling a lot of sad
I mean, there's, without a doubt, I mean, we'll get on to some of the more salubrious tour stories and so on maybe
Someone
a bit
just
later.
brought a young boy in there, so I'm not doing anything salubrious.
Oh, really? Is there a young child in here?
Have you got rid of him? He's deaf. What's he saying? Is he asleep? Oh, there he is, see?
Okay, yeah, well, maybe you'll have to cover his ears up a little bit later. You say in the book that Movement came out and you didn't actually like it at the time, but you look back on it now and you do.
No, Movement I didn't like because the atmosphere it was made in was awful. And basically it was a Joy Division musical album with New Order vocals. And I thought it was very sad actually when Bernard disowned it. Because, you know, for your first preparatory steps, for your little toddles out, I think it's actually got a lot going for it, Movement. And to play it live, as I did in 2012 or whatever, it was fantastic. I loved it. You know, it's really some great tunes. And when the band get together and do it, and it works, it is magical. You know, as I described, the New Order was always a bit like a table with a wonky leg. You know, it always wobbled, and sometimes you'd be able to shore it up. So some nights you'd be great, and then some nights it'd wobble like mad. So, you know, our fans did actually become quite aware that they could never rely on New Order for a good performance.
What were those early gigs like then? Because you go into detail on a few of them.
Yeah, we had a lot of riots. Yeah, I mean, you know, gigging in coming out of punk was very aggressive. It was very male. You were actually surprised if you saw a woman at a punk gig. Oh, there's a woman. You know, it was really, and it was very beery, it was very football fanny. It wasn't, you know, I mean, it was amazing when we first got to Australia and places in America, and the audiences there were 50-50, male, female. Wow, completely different atmosphere. But the ones in England, you were literally fighting for your life at most of the gigs. Spitting was still quite popular, shall we say, although I find it hard to believe that it's ever been popular. I've had more fights on stage because of people spitting than ever, you know. It's disgusting, man. My favourite one, that seems old, doesn't it? My favourite one was at Macclesfield Leisure Centre, and there was a kid at the front, and he was spitting all the way through, and I was, if you do that, kind of, and all this lot, and on Blue Monday I turned round to play the Syndromes, and he went and I could see him out the corner of my eye, and I'm playing the Syndromes, and then all of a sudden he went and this big whirly green thing came and just attached itself to my leg, and I looked at his face and he went right. So anyway, we came back on the next song, Magic and Sound. So I'm there, he's there. Bang! Right in his nose. And he went down like that. And then he came back, you're a bastard. I said, you're a bastard. And I turned around and the bloody head fell off my guitar. That cost me 150 quid. So yeah, I mean, spitting, it's an interesting...
But you'd play short sets as well and no encores.
40 minutes.
Yeah. Well, we thought encores were boring. We thought playing the music was pretty boring, actually. I mean, you know, to play a gig now, like we did at Barrowlands last week, for 2 3/4 hours, we were coming on as New Order and doing 21 minutes. And then we were wondering why we were having riots. Why are we having a riot? What's the matter with them? It was absolutely bizarre. And I remember when we had the fantastic riot in Holland and
in Rotterdam.
In Rotterdam, yes.
So there's actually photos of the fighting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, one of the nice things about doing the book was stumbling across these photos that kids have of the group, and amazingly this guy had took pictures of me having the shit kicked out of me in Rotterdam, so I put them in the book. And I mean that was an interesting gig. We were playing with the Stockholm Monsters, we played for 21 minutes, and it was obvious that the Dutch audience expected more. Now they're all a bit taller than, well, maybe it's just me, 5'7", but they seemed pretty big. And they weren't going anywhere, and they started throwing things on the stage, and the road crew were going out and telling them to F off, and you know, all this. There was a lot of gesticulating, and I remember our sound guy Ozzy, he looked out in the crowd and he said to this Dutch kid, "If you throw that, mate, I'm coming out there." And he threw it, so he dived full length, and then as he went down, they all piled on him, and I thought, oh, I can't have that. So I dived off. As I dived off, they all went, "He's out of the group!" and kicked the shit out of me. I never thought that would have happened, and I remember we were fighting, and this kid got me right on the nose, and I hit my head on the wall, and he knocked me out. And I passed out, and then Slim and Dave Pills came and rescued me. And the interesting thing was, when they dragged me backstage, he said to me, he said, "You all right?" And I went, "No more milk on these cornflakes, man." And I actually saw pink elephants. I thought it was a fallacy, that thing, you know, that people in films do. But yeah, I had pink elephants going all around me. Oh, it was wild, it was unbelievable. But anyway, years later to get the photos, and of the fight, and then I was looking at the photos, and I was looking at it and I thought, oh, you know, there's all us lot on the floor and all at it, and then I looked in the corner, and on the first floor balcony, above watching all the action, is the picture of Barney, Steve and Gillian.
There's a recurring theme in the book about it. When there's any trouble, Barney doesn't tend to be there.
Yeah, no, he's always hiding under the piano, yeah, he's not, well, yeah, well, he says he's not a fighter.
Tell us a bit about Gillian joining the band as well, because obviously the three of you have been, you know, a tight unit, and...
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a selfish decision. We didn't want an established musician to come in and change the sound. It really was selfish. Gillian had played guitar. She was in a band called The Inadequates. No comment. So we brought her in to play guitar. She played guitar when Bernard had a toy fight with Rob backstage, and Rob cut his hand open with a broken bottle. That's the toy fights we have. So she stood in on the Joy Division gig, and Rob remembered that, and she was always hanging about. You know, Steve was one of these people in those days that took his girlfriend everywhere, and so she was always there, and there was no other girls there. So yeah, I suppose she was available, and Bernard and I, quite selfishly, knew she was very inexperienced, and she wouldn't make much difference. So that was the decision, you know, to get her in.
You are pretty disparaging. You're never particularly complimentary about her as a musician throughout the book.
I'd like to think it's a little more subtle than that. You know,
it's not.
The thing about it is that, you know, groups give off this veneer, don't they? You know, and it's a bit like a pantomime. Yeah. Oh yes, it is. So you pretend to be happy, and you pretend that you like each other, and you pretend, you know, it's just the way it is, and it's not that.
And there's one part later in the book when you're in a helicopter, and you mention that you're all terrified, and Gillian grabs your knee, and you said that's the one time she ever touched you in the entire time that you knew her.
I tell you what, you should have been in that helicopter, mate. You'd have been sat on me knee. It was like a flying motorbike. My God, I thought I was going to die. I've only been on a helicopter twice, and that's 2 times more than enough for me. Yeah. It was what happened was we were going into Glastonbury, and it was when Glastonbury you know, exploded in popularity. And basically there was a 3.5 hour traffic jam, and in true New Order fashion we had about 2.5 hours to get in because we were, you know, pissed up by the pool or something in the hotel down the road. So the only way we could get in was to someone had to phone up Michael Eavis and say, can you get the guy doing fun rides round the sites to come and pick New Order up, because they've left it too late to get to the festival. And he's a nice guy, he charged us 25 quid. And, but only 3 of you could get in it at a time, and it ended up somehow with me and Gillian being in it. So yeah, it was fun, it was a great gig. Yeah, I think the capacity went up to 75, and when the police have a way of counting, there's 350,000 people who had just gone over the fence. It was like their English version of Woodstock.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fantastic, I mean, it was great to watch Michael Eavis. He was walking round backstage with black bin liners full of money, paying everybody in cash, because he made that much money, you know. It was, yeah, compared to the first time we played it, when we co-headlined it with Hawkwind. And there was, you know, a few sweaty farmers and a load of hippies there, you know, hardly anybody there. It was quite a contrast. Yeah. I mean, you know, one of my great claims to fame is to headline Glastonbury 3 times.
Mm.
So
and there's you know, records, and you go through every single gig and they're all listed there. Some incredible shows that you play throughout your career. We'll come to those maybe in a few minutes. Talking about the music again, I'd like to talk just about the technology, because I mean, New Order, it's such a pioneering band. The combination of the post-punk and kind of rock that you've been doing with Joy Division and beyond, and then the technology coming in. Just explain how that came into the sound and why you took to it so quickly.
well, I mean, I didn't.
I know,
I was the dinosaur
Yeah.
that just wanted to play, mate. What happened was that in Joy Division, Bernard particularly embraced it, swiftly followed by Steve, and they became the experts in what was available then. I mean, in Joy Division, you had the synth that Bernard had built himself from a kit, which he used quite widely actually on the records. Steve was using snare drums on the inside, and She's Lost Control and stuff like that. And then as the new stuff became available, Pearl Syndromes, Simmons, you know, everybody was getting these things. And Rob Gretton was a marvel, actually, because he'd never give you any money. But if you wanted to go and buy some really expensive equipment, the money would appear. it was like magic. You know, I mean, I think we were on 30 quid a week. And this was after the Hacienda. You know, the Hacienda was losing 10 grand a month. And we were on 30 quid a week. You know, you couldn't even pay your gas bill or survive or anyway. But if you wanted a Pro 5, Profit 5, which was 2,000 quid, you get the money. I think it's rock managers, you know, in history tend to be tough men who are very, very single-minded. You know, I don't know if you get them now, but you know, when you look at people like Alan Klein, Peter Grant, yeah, you know, even the guy who did U2, they're very, very
Paul
good.
McInnes,
That's right, yeah. And you know, nowadays you don't hear of these people. Don Arden was another one. You know, they're very clever, I suppose you'd have to say. Now, the odd thing about Rob was that in 1980, I was 24. He was only 27, and yet we thought he was mature. Yeah, you know, the amount of responsibility he took on in taking a group that went around the world, you know, that management mantle is a tough.
He's on, up to a point in the book, he's on almost every page of this book. He's this huge figure in the whole story, and you know, you're talking about 30 quid, getting paid 30 quid a week, that went up to 70, which went up to 100. I mean, at the peak of New Order, when you were selling millions of albums, you were on 200 quid a week, I think. I mean, that's the most...
Yeah, but the irony was that we had no money. You know, we had nothing in the bank. And yeah, I mean, it's quite a familiar song with groups. You know, I mean, it wasn't long ago that my mate phoned me up, who managed a very famous band in Manchester that had split up. And he said, I said, you know, that dickhead phoned me up the other day, the singer, he said, hey, X, where did all the money go? And he went, where did all the money go? He said, yeah, we must have earned loads of money. What happened to it all? And he went, well, you put half of it up your nose and you flew the other half around the world. It's called your gear. And that's where all your money went. You know, you just wasted it. We were as good at wasting it as maybe a manager could be accused of misappropriating it. You know, in our case, it was being misappropriated into the world's biggest nightclub that was a failure financially, but amazingly successful culturally and musically. And you know, Rob Gretton always used to say to me, listen, money can't buy heritage like that. And I said, well, that's fucking lucky, innit? Because you certainly had a good go.
But you always, another thing is that you always seem to have nice cars. He always gets you a nice car. Was that to placate you?
Yeah, it was, because I think he knew, how can I shut this idiot up? I know, I'll buy him a car. And it works every single time. You know, I mean, when I bought my first car, which was the Alfa Romeo, which is when I got my Stalker, the car cost 5,100, and they wanted to insure it 5,150. When I got my second car, which was an Audi, the car cost 8,200, and my house had only cost 9,900. And the bloody car sat outside. The car should have been in the house. You know, it was that expensive. I mean, that seems ridiculous, you know, now to do those things. But he did. He got us the cars, and every time you went in, he had this other charming trait that, because me and Barney had proper jobs, we both had credit cards, access cards, if anyone's old enough to remember an access card, my God. And he'd say, go and get some strings on your access card and all this lot, and then you'd get the receipt, and you'd take in the receipt, and he'd go, right, how much do I owe you? And you go, well, there's the interest. Oh, I don't pay interest. No, I don't believe in interest. No, we access, you borrow the money, and there's interest on it every month, so I've borrowed the money to get the strings for Barney's guitar. Now I want you to give me the money back, but you've got to pay the interest. No, don't fucking pay interest, don't ask me again. So me and Barney were like, why is he on about? It's just one of his peculiar quirks. He would never pay interest, thought it was a work of the devil. Like I'd done it. You know, so that was one of his financial quirks, shall we say. So anyway, so me and Barney had to stop using our credit cards, because we just went, no, do get one yourself. And he got an American Express card, which was hilarious.
And he worked you hard as well. I mean, early days with New Order, you're over in America, where you do manage to lose your gear as well.
We lost everything, mate. Our innocence was the first to go. But he insisted on being with you all the time. Now, most rock managers stay in the office and sort the business out while you're off earning. But he didn't. You know, he used to come with us, get pissed up, run around the nightclubs. He was doing everything that we were doing without the shit bit. You know, the going on stage and writing the songs bit. He was having a great time. And he did that, and I actually admired it, because he knew that if you were in some long foreign climb, if you got in trouble, the only one that had come out is Rob Gretton. And I was very thankful for that on many occasions.
And he was pretty useful.
He was handy. He was a city fan. He was a Withenshaw boy. He used to roadie for Slaughter and the Dogs, which is a hell of a job. And yeah, he was good, and he lived the group. You know, when we went to America the first time after we signed to Warner Brothers with Quincy Jones's label, which was a great compliment in itself, I remember being at the party, and Rob had found the only chair in this party, and he was slumped on it, smoking a joint, pissed. And Mo Austin, who was the head of Warner Brothers, very, very influential man, he said to me, he said, hey Peter, he said, I've not met your manager yet, where is he? And I went, oh, yeah, oh, he's there. He's like, oh. And he went, he's your manager? I'd never seen anything like it. And I went, yeah, he is. Because it was part of our charm. You know, we did everything against the book. I mean, I think one of my disenchantments with New Order by 2007, apart from the obvious in the book, was that we'd stopped doing anything interesting. We were just another group going through the motions. There just seemed no heart and soul in it to me. I mean, in the early days, I was talking about it in the car before, you know, we'd stay up all night, so we looked rough on top of the pops. Without drugs. Just because we thought it was funny to look rough on top of the pops. And we'd be poking each other in the hotel room, don't go to sleep, we've only got to go, we're leaving at 7. You know, it was just mad. But that was what appealed to us. And then we get to Top of the Pops and demand to play live when they'd never had, I think I'd seen one live, I think Bowie did Gene Genie once, as I remember. Excuse me, I'm just moving this. And they weren't set up for, you know, all these machines that we were using. They didn't have the DI boxes, they might have had the mics for Bowie, but they didn't have all this stuff we needed to play Blue Monday, you know. So of course it sounded shit, but we thought that was really funny. But it sounded shit, and everybody used to say, oh yeah, you get on Top of the Pops and your single goes up 10 places, guaranteed. We went on, sounded shit, it went down, we were delighted. Yes, stick it to the man. You know, I mean, it was just absolute madness, but that's what we bought into, and I think that that's what made the group special, because no one ever does that. Imagine One Direction doing that. Yeah, let's go on and play shit. It's going to be great. Well, they do anyway, don't they? That's weird.
Yeah, that's why they don't have to. Blue Monday, you know, you're complimentary about it. Obviously, you know how important it is as a record, but you also see it as a bit of an albatross and around your neck, and it was just kind of, you don't think it's, you know, it deserves the praise quite as much as some of the other songs.
Thieves Like Us was a much better song, you know, than Blue Monday, in my opinion. I have to say that, I've been knocking around with lawyers too long. And Blue Monday was sonically, and I mean, it was the mistakes on Blue Monday that made it interesting, because we were trying to, the way you recorded in the old days for you new timers, it was on a piece of tape. So you'd press the machines and they'd run through and you'd record it. And once it was on tape, you couldn't change it unless you did the cutting bit, which was not recommended in the middle of a 24-track tape. So when you started laying the other instruments on, you'd realise that when you'd done the sequence, you'd made a mistake. And instead of something being 8 bars, it was 6. Or something was 12 instead of 10 or something like that. And you were stuck with it. And on Blue Monday, there's loads of errors like that because it was so long. But what you did was you made the song fit it because you had to. And it actually gave it a quite a unique and different feel because it wasn't quite right, but it was still a great song. Nowadays on a computer, you can just cut, paste, move it around. You never make any mistakes. And these were happy mistakes. You know, there weren't many bad mistakes that you were making when you did it like this. So it made the music quite unique, and then you'd spend the whole of your career replaying that mistake because it sounds great, you know. So it was a different way of working the whole thing with Blue Monday. Blue Monday originally was a song because everybody kept asking for an encore. I mean, after the riot in Rotterdam was the first time that the guy said to me, you know, you'll never play in this town again. You know, as I said in there, I said I wish I had £1 for every promoter that said to me, you'll never play in this town again, because literally I'd be, at least I'd have 50 quid in my pocket, you know what I mean? And the thing is that he said, you cannot expect people to pay and do no encore when you play such a short set. 21 minutes, outrageous. So we increased it to 24. And still didn't do an encore, you know what I mean? This is bloody mindedness, and it's only the young that can be like that, you know. Well, I mean, I've got kids now, I know,
Well, before we leave Blue Monday, we are kind of running out of time. We've only got a few. We're going to have to get to some juicy bits, and then I'll turn it over to you guys to ask a few questions, and then Peter will be signing books, thanks to Waterstones. But just quickly, while we're on Blue Monday, what happened with Sunkissed? Does anyone know this story? Because I didn't know it until I read it in the book. Do you want to tell that story quickly?
Again, we didn't do sponsorship, and we didn't do adverts. We thought they were corny. We just didn't do it. And the guy who was the head of advertising at Sunkissed, you know, the orange drink, came to us and said, gee, we've had a great idea. We want to use Sunkissed. Big promotion, we want to use your music, but we want to change the lyrics. So we went, oh, do you? And he said, we'll pay you £350,000. Now, bearing in mind, we were on about 50 quid a week. Hacienda was leaking money like the bleeding Titanic, going down, you know, and we had no concept of that money, none. So it didn't even impress us at all. And the guy was so forceful, he came down to the studio, he wrote the lyrics out for Barney, so that Barney could sing it, because we were redoing Blue Monday for Quincy Jones to remix. The timing was actually quite right. So anyway, Barney sang it, we all fell about in heaps of laughter.
And it's like, how does it feel to drink Sunkissed every day? Or something like that. And it's like,
when you're singing in the sun and Sunkissed is the one, we were just pissing ourselves. And we said, mate, do one. You know, we were two. No, that's... Our art is suffering, you know. And now I'd rip his hand off. But then, our art was suffering. So we threw him out. Unbeknown to us, the engineer didn't wipe the vocal. He left it on the track. So when we sent it to America to be remixed by Quincy Jones, Quincy had a real weird way of mixing. He had 3 studios on the go, and he used to sit at home on his telephone, and he'd phone each studio up and he'd listen over the phone. So we had 3 engineers doing the mix, and he'd tell them how to mix over the phone. You know, he'd mix Michael Jackson over the phone. Can you believe that? Unbelievable, what a genius. Fantastic job. And one of these engineers must have found the Sunkissed vocal and done a bootleg of it. I don't know if they probably thought it was funny, and put it out. And Sunkissed came across it and actually did a video to it and got it for nothing.
I haven't actually looked, but apparently it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
All right, I'm getting the signs from the side of the stage, which means that we will come to your questions.
I'm glad we couldn't do the dirty bits, because I'm worried about that part.
Yeah, I think we might have to leave the dirty bits, but let me just tell you that there's huge amounts of tour shenanigans from a certain member of our entourage, and from Peter, who quite frankly, candidly and honestly talks about his dalliances with women and illegal substances. There's absolutely tons of it. You will not be disappointed.
Don't try this at home. Right? This is the evil Knievel.
And also for the music obsessives and nerds out there, much like myself, there's a track-by-track breakdown of every single album that goes into detail of where it was recorded, you know, how it was produced, notes on each song, etc., explanations. It's fantastic. It really is. Before I hand it over to the audience, and it has to be a question we've not talked about, what the Red Tops have been talking about this week, which is Caroline O'Hearn, but you can read all about it in the book. I have to touch upon the final breakup and then the band getting back together without you. I mean, how does that make you feel? And I mean,
how does it feel?
Yeah, how does it feel?
But I mean, we'd fallen out pretty comprehensively. I mean, I was really pissed off with Barney. His attitude, I felt, to the group and to the audiences were disgusting. And I couldn't put up with it anymore. He actually treated me as if I worked for him. And I kept saying, I don't work for you, mate, I work with you. You know, and I just felt that he didn't like the group. He was acting like he didn't like the group, he didn't like the music, he didn't give a shit about anything. So we split the band up. And I was right, we didn't. He didn't come to me and say, no, let's keep it together, no, let's do this, I'll change. No, there was none of that, you know, and we had meetings where him and Steve talked about it, and we decided to knock it on the head. which I was actually quite relieved about, to be honest, because it really did feel bad compared to how it used to be. And basically, I started the factory. It filtered back. They were pissed off about that. And it was always the same with Barney. It was never do as I do. It was always do as I say. So he was pissed off about me opening the factory's office as a club. Then he got really pissed off with me because I resurrected the Hacienda, because me and Rob Gretton bought the trade name for the Hacienda when he went bankrupt at a public auction, which he seems to forget because he accused me of stealing it from him. How could I steal it from you at a public auction? You know, Cream were bidding for it, Guillaume Goy were bidding for it. There was loads of people there bidding for it, you know. But anyway, that's, you be the judge and jury, whatever, execution, whatever you want to be. So the thing is that then I started playing Joy Division, and that was the heinous crime of all, because I didn't ask them. And I went, hang on a minute, you've been playing it in Bad Lieutenant 6 months before I played it, you never asked me, and you played New Order. Oh no, that's different. I was like, bollocks. So all these things were ganging up where the antagonism was really, really bad. And then I got really annoyed when they went, we were still sharing the same management, which was a bit weird, but they went and picked up a Mojo Award for Joy Division and didn't tell me. And I read about it in the paper and I was fucking sorry. I'm sure your dad says it. I was livid. And I just felt absolutely humiliated and betrayed that they'd go and pick up an award for Control, which I started, and I made sure we did the music for. I, made sure Anton worked on it with us. And the fight we had over Control, which is in there, it was terrible. It was very difficult. The whole thing was really difficult, and I just felt, right, you know what? I just cannot even contemplate talking to you lot again, so I cut off all ties with them. Maybe that was where I went wrong. What happened then was you have to bear in mind that in 2008 there was a pretty much financial disaster in the world, and a lot of pension funds went the way, and ours was one of them. And then they decided to get back together again, and they decided to exclude me. And they waited until I was in China DJing, and they did a boardroom coup with the limited company and transferred the assets of the limited company, which were the name and the IP, the goodwill, over to a new company that them three owned. And that's what I'm fighting for. And they decided, I'm not too sure how many of us have got divorced here and let their other half settle the alimony. It's not really a good idea. And they decided that my 25% share was now worth 1%. So whenever you order in £1, I get 1p. They get 99 between. It's as simple as that, and I'm fighting for what I consider to be my just desserts.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to cut it short. This book is.
It was getting a bit heavy, wasn't it?
This is one of the. I'm someone that gobbles up, devours rock biographies, and this is one of the funniest, most exciting, and ultimately, in some ways, tragic book that I've read. But it is vibrant from beginning to end. It is absolutely astonishing. And can we get a few questions from the audience? Yes, we can. Yes, a few. Okay, down here, and we'll get 5 or 6, and then of course you can go and buy yourself a book. And if you've got a question, specific question for Peter, you'll ask. You can ask him it there and then. So yes, fellow down here.
Okay. Well, I've been along since I first saw New Order, Liverpool, February 1981. Nothing had been released. No drum field session. 70 was now. I didn't even know who the fourth member was until he walked on stage. And I've been there since then. And it, as you're right, it's like seeing, because you're older than me, it is like seeing your parents divorce. And it really, when you read the things that happen in the press, it massively breaks your heart. And you just wish that somehow the two of you especially could sit down and have a chat and say, look, we both said things that we shouldn't have here, but honestly, do you really think there's ever going to be a time in the future where will either get on stage with the rest of the band or get in the studio with the rest of the band?
At the moment, the answer is no, because that bit when you do split up with your missus, she cuts all the legs off your trousers and starts looking at the dog with a saw, which end do you want? We're still at that bit, and we've been at that bit for 5 years. And when you're in that bit, you can't really see a future for either of you, which is the truth. And the thing is that they plotted what they did. Yeah, they started plotting it in February 2011, and they did it on the 2nd of September 2011. They did it to me. So really, the people you should be asking who can put it right, they're not here, are they? It's not me. They excluded me. It's the worst kind of bullying. Being excluded is disgusting behaviour. Right? I remember in the playground, and it's just not right. And I'm fighting for the people that have been treated like that. In many ways, it's like same thing with Caroline. Caroline was a very popular, very successful actress. She was brilliantly talented. But what happens behind closed doors, none of you lot know. And her brother certainly didn't know. But I'm telling the truth. I'm not scared to tell the truth. And the thing is that you do have to sum up what's going to happen to you. But to me, there was no point in me writing a book about my life and leaving out something that nearly destroyed me. Because maybe you hope that when you do it, it'll inspire someone. And maybe they'll take action, or maybe they'll look at what happened to you and go, you know what, there is life after this. I can do it, I can get through this, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. And what happened to me on Tuesday morning, which was quite weird, is that I went to the gym, as I do, and a young girl came up to me, and she said, oh, I saw you in the mail yesterday. I don't know. And she went on to tell me of a big load of abuse that she was suffering in her life. And I tried to help her. And that's why I did it. Because I don't want people to suffer like I did. And if I can help one person not have to suffer like I did, whoever fault it was, that's why I did it. And I tried to help her. And that was it.
Yes, another one down here, down the front. Chap with a white t-shirt on.
Thank you. Peter, what song would you say most defines
That's
Joy
better.
Division and your solo?
Thanks, mate. Sorry, say it again.
What song for you most defines Joy Division and also for New Order as well?
Joy Division, I have to say, it's atmosphere. And the weird thing about atmosphere was that I remember that poll, yeah, about songs that get played most at funerals and songs that get played most at weddings. And I thought, oh God, I hope we don't get funerals. And we did. Bloody Robbie Williams got Angels weddings, I was like, you bastard. So the thing is that for me, it sums up Joy Division perfectly. The lyrics and the music are just so wonderful. And to think that we wrote atmosphere in like 2 hours or something. And it has been synonymous with everything that we do now. At Alan Wise's funeral, we lost through a broken heart, which was really tragic. His daughter's suicide. It was a horrible thing. They played it at his funeral. And I've come to accept now that every time I go to a funeral for someone I loved, our song will be there. And when we played it at Tony's, that was a moment. Yeah, terrible. But yeah, so New Order, let's get back on that. Leave Me Alone, mate. Not the song. Leave Me Alone does sum up the wonderfulness of New Order to me. Yeah, great song. I mean, it's hard to choose actually, because when you start looking back at what a huge back catalogue we've got, and the great thing about playing the LPs is that you rediscover the songs. You know, I mean, there was a transition that New Order went through that changed us from being acoustic to electronic. And I always felt that the most atmospheric songs that we wrote were when we wrote them together, when it was a real collaborative effort. And they're the ones that make the group for me, not the electronic ones, because they're always a bit colder, they're a bit different. You know, you can hear that they're not written with love, passion, heart and soul. You know, that's what mainly songwriting to me is about. So I always go with the acoustic one.
Okay, one more question, otherwise I'm going to get my head kicked in. So one more question, let's see a hand. Yeah, right in the middle there. Fellow with the... Yes, absolutely. There's a mic to your right there, or to your left, sorry.
Hello. Would you have stayed with Factory if they hadn't gone under?
Yeah, we were daft enough to stay with Factory, yeah. I mean, it's hilarious, really, the goings on in Factory we were such a bunch of dickheads. We made every mistake you could possibly make, and revelled in it, you know. And in a funny way, I mean, I've seen people have massive success and earn massive amounts of money, and they do disappear into another world, you know. But what I did like about, yeah, it sounds daft to say it, but I actually like the fact that they kept us poor, because it kept us down to earth. It did, you know, nothing fazed you. You just were, I don't know, it's hard to describe, because you weren't divorced from anything, you know. You couldn't pay your gas bill. You were wondering where the food was going to come from. You were wondering, God, I've got a baby on the way and I've got no money, what am I going to do? I've got no pension, I've got nothing. You know, like every normal person's nightmare, really. We were living it, and even though we were, you know, packing out stadiums to 30,000 people, you were still living that. And that was one of the beauties of Factory, was that they did keep us all down to earth. And, you know, I'd have to say I wouldn't change. I really wouldn't change anything.
So what was it like going to London then?
London, it was a big change. I mean, if you, it's in the book, and you can see it really, because London became, as a record company, did nothing but cash in on the back catalogue over and over and over again. And the interesting thing about London was that they were like Factory with money. They were daft, but in a completely different way, and the guys that ran London Records were mad as hatters. But it was a real struggle for us to extricate ourselves from Factory and walk out of it with our belongings, if you like, with our songs, was really, it was airy. We nearly lost everything, you know. So when we got to London, there was a huge sigh of relief, because we'd survived, because you know, it nearly took us down when the liquidator, I mean, I don't know if anyone ever here has ever liquidated a company, but my God, it ain't fun, and it's really hard, and it seems like an easy way out when you do it. Oh right, come on, we'll go bankrupt. It's not easy, and you get yourselves in all sorts of problems, terrible problems. And London was fun for a while, and they wasted more money than Factory. I mean, there's a wonderful moment in there. We did 4 videos for Republic. I think the total cost in there was something like 1.2 million on our bill. Right, you owe us 1.2 million. So for 4 videos, and I reckon 3.5 of them were shit. The video is like, you may as well open a train window and throw £50,000 out, shut it again and go, somebody will find that and make a great video. You know, it really is that much of a shot in the dark as to whether you're going to get a good video. Like Regret was hilarious, because the guy spent 3 weeks in Cannes on pre-production, by the pool mate, it looked like to me by that time. Then we filmed it, crap. I mean, we didn't make his life much easier. I especially didn't make his life very easy in the book. And then at the end of it, he decided to go, oh, you know what, I need to film a little bit more for the end, and I'm going to film it in Los Angeles. So he changes from Rome to Los Angeles right at the end of the video, and then charged us $450,000. You go, well, it was just like nothing made sense, you know. So it was actually nice to be on a big record company where nothing made sense.
And on that note, we'll have to leave it, ladies and gentlemen, not because I want to. I've been lucky enough to speak to Hookie about Unknown Pleasures, his Joy Division book, and again tonight about Substance Inside New Order. Get a copy of this, you will not regret it. It is one of the best books I've ever read, and it's an absolute pleasure. Hookie, Peter Hook, give it up!